Hello, hello. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we go. Yes. Can you tell us your name? Because right now the call screening equipment is not displaying your name for me.
This is Louis from New York. I
Louis
spoke to
from New
you,
York. Thanks
Dan,
so
a
much.
couple years ago when Jamie Woodhouse was on, and we had a fun discussion about UFOs over LA.
Yeah, I think I remember that, Louis. Thanks so much for calling in. Sorry, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. What do you want to talk to us about today on this show?
Yes, I'm not. I don't have any new UFO stories, but so from my recollection, this show's discussed things like religion, cults, and nationalism in terms of a group bias. And I'm curious whether you guys think that the same concern applies to how humans view themselves, like relative to sentient animals. So if moral value ought to be based on sentience rather than group membership, how do humanists justify exclusive human moral priority without it becoming like species level tribalism?
Well, Louis, I think that is an excellent point, and it's one of the reasons why I'm a vegan because I think that humanists do tend to have this bias where they think that human beings are the most important thing in the world, and our values and our wants and our needs have to be more important because we are smarter, better, whatever justification insert here, right? That you put into that. But as humanists should be the first to recognize, look, we are an evolved species and we're just as evolved as any other being on this earth that's evolved, right? We've changed. We have significantly different adaptations, but we're really not that different in terms of the nitty gritty. We still have nervous systems. We still have systems of nociception, all kinds of stuff that we share with other animals. So I don't like human supremacist ideas. I want to try to level that out. Now, to be clear, if there's a burning building and I either have to save a dog or a human baby, I'm going to save the human baby because I'm biased towards human beings. But in regular aspects of life, I want to try to normalize that. I want to try to level the playing field as much as I can so that we don't have to exploit animals because I cannot philosophically justify it. So, yeah, I don't know. We're thinking along the same lines there. But Jess, what do you think?
No, I agree with you,
I
and I'm
made
sure you would agree with me. I'd like to hear your guest host's opinion on this as well.
Yep.
But
That's
I
why
think we
I
both
said,
agree
Jess,
that
what do you think? Sorry, Louis,
just
maybe you didn't catch that, but go ahead, Jess.
I was a vegan for a number of years myself, and I'm just learning about humanism now. So I feel like I don't have a lot to say on this one in particular. But you had mentioned sentience versus group tribalism. Could you expand on that a little bit for me?
yeah, well, I think that a lot of people would agree that sentience is something that we value in other humans, right? It's like that subjective experience. It's not like I think we don't value like a particular race or particular any particular traits, but the thing that I think we most value in terms of morality is like sentience, and I think because we value that in humans, that therefore we should really, to be like intellectually consistent, value that in other organisms that we can understand to be sentient, or that that clearly seem to be sentient.
Yeah.
Um, Again, I'm still learning about humanism, so I don't. I I was vegan for 2 years. It was both I guess a moral issue and also a healthy one as well. And towards the more moral side of things, I think when you do choose a sentient being over what you would classify as a non-sentient being, you are making an active decision there. I think Dan definitely has been vegan and practicing a lot longer than I have in regards to that.
Yeah. There is a distinction, but I think that the distinction in terms of like moral value, I think is a reasonable distinction, since there's no like sufficient evidence that plants or rocks or anything are sufficient, but there does clearly seem to be sufficient evidence that animals, and humans are of course are animals, that we are sentient. And so if we say that like if I think you brought up plants, maybe because you're saying we're discriminating against plants, but I think that's in terms of morality, that's fine to discriminate against them because they're not sentient.
Yes, I'm in agreement with you, Louis, because some atheists like to bring this to my attention. And they're like, oh, hey, did you know plants can feel things? And I'm like, did you read this in a popular science article? Because like, by what system are we talking about plants being able to feel things? We recognize that plants may be able to communicate things, right? And be able to interpret things through their own systems. But even if that's the case, that they do have some sort of system of nociception there, it's not something that we can evaluate at this time. What we can evaluate is everything that happens through animals, right? Evolutionarily, I don't think it makes sense for a plant to be able to feel pain. Pain is so that you can get away from something. If you're a plant, what are you going to do? It doesn't make sense from an evolutionary standpoint. But with animals, they feel pain just like human beings do. And you can argue about the complexity of that pain and what it looks like with the rest of human emotions. But by and large, if you have a nervous system and you can sense things, you can feel that kind of pain. So yeah, Peter Singer first categorized this idea in his book Animal Liberation, which was written in the 70s, and he talks about speciesism, and human beings by and large are pretty specious. We really think that human beings are all that matters at the end of the day. And of course, there's some people now that are challenging that idea, but that's kind of been the human norm for a long time, even amongst skeptical people that I would agree on other things with mostly, but not on this issue.
I agree, and I want to stress. What's the guest host name again? I'm sorry, I forgot the.
This is Jess who's speaking with you today, Louis.
Yeah, I'm Jess.
I don't remember the name because I had this show volume off because I just didn't want to disturb the call here, so I don't remember the guest host name.
No worries.
What was
did you have a further question?
Were you going to add to that?
Anyway, I was going to say that just because we value like other sentient animals, right, it doesn't mean we have to value them in the same exact way that we do humans, right? And so I think that's the point that Jamie brought up earlier. That Dan brought up earlier, and I would agree with that, right? Like if it's between saving, the baby or the dog, right? There's nothing wrong with saying that we would save the baby, right? But that doesn't mean that we don't value morally the dog, right? So yeah. we should value both morally because they're sentient, and of course goes for farmed animals as well.
I agree, Louis. We're on the same page here. We're in click step. It's Jess now that we have to convince on this. So Jess, what are your thoughts? I know there are a lot. Maybe this is not the call you were expecting. So did you have any other challenges to that perspective you wanted to bring to the table?
I don't really have challenges. I'm more interested in the group tribalism aspect of it, and I kind of wanted to know more about that.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't mean to like. I think that I think in my view, right? Like, well, I have a problem with tribalism in general, and I think it's kind of like a group think, like in group, out group thing, and it applies to like nationalists and supremacists and cults and religions typically, but I think it also can apply to humanists, as I mentioned before, and I think that's maybe a short-sightedness by a lot of humanists. Now, I'm not saying that all humanists think in the same exact way, but I do think it's a type of in-group bias where the in-group is the humans and the excluded group are the sentient animals, and so I think it is a problem. I think that humanism is a problem in that sense.
I think you're right. And as somebody who identifies as a vegan publicly, it's weird because, again, even among some of my most open-minded friends, some of them still think it's okay to like make those kinds of jokes and to make those kinds of, that kind of humor that I wouldn't expect them to make, because they're supposed to be the sort of open, loving, sort of progressive people. But apparently I'm still one of those categories of groups of people where you can still make fun of them. It's like, I thought we were supposed to be kind of all on the same page here about being progressive and being more open-minded. But yeah, I do see that bias still when it comes to thinking in terms of, human supremacy, right? Yeah, it's definitely an area that I think other people are very clearly ignoring, or maybe don't want to talk about. Because here's the thing: animals cannot, by and large, advocate for themselves, right? When we talk about injustices in human beings, those groups of people that are oppressed, they may not have the largest voice in the room, but there's still a voice you can go to. With animals, it's only going to ever be up to humans to make that change in justice. And it's a much harder thing to do. So I'm still going to do what I think is right at the end of the day. But yeah, I think more and more people are thinking in terms of how we think, Louis. We'll see what it looks like 5-10 years from now, but I think it's getting some progress.
Yeah, I do too. I definitely think there's absolute progress. Veganism, of course, is not a diet, right? It's a principle of not being complicit in exploitation, right? That's needless exploitation. And so, we have to be careful to not view veganism as a diet, which I think is done pretty often. But also the other thing, and I'll let you go. You guys probably have a number of other callers coming in, but I just wanted to stress also that these are sentient individuals. They're victims that are at on the other end of these decisions we make to eat their flesh and their milk and their eggs. And so it's a pretty serious thing to really consider as soon as possible.
I agree. Well, Louis, I don't know what else to say, because I pretty much agree with everything you said so far. And I don't know if that makes for very interesting conversation, except maybe if this is a perspective that you and I share and not many other people, which I do think is the case. But yeah, I appreciate you calling nonetheless. Haters will say that you're some sort of plant, I guess, pun intended, but you're just a random caller. And yeah, I definitely agree along the same lines of thinking. So thanks so much for calling the show.
All right. Speak to you next time.
Thanks again, Louis. Have a great one. So yeah, there you go. Talking a little bit about sentientism, talking about the rights of animals. Folks, we still have open lines where we want to talk to you about other subjects. But Jess, what did you think about that call?
I actually had a question for you, Dan.
Okay.
You said the name was Peter Singer and it was Animal Liberation. That was the book?
That's
I just
one of
wanted
the first
to
books
double check.
I read when it came to animal rights. Yeah. Peter Singer's a philosopher, and Animal Liberation's name of that book. The other book that I always recommend to people is a book called Why We Eat. I always get the thing wrong. Why We Eat Pigs, Wear Cows. Man, what is it? Why We Eat Pigs, Wear Cows in... No, that's not true. Wait, hold on. Why We Eat Cows... No, I'm going to figure out that. Why We Love Dogs. Here we go. Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows. That's the name of the title. That's a book by
Here's the line.
Dr.
Gotcha.
Melanie Joy. And she talks also a lot about the philosophy or idea of carnism, which kind of plays along similar lines to speciesism. But yeah, those are the books that first kind of exposed me to those ideas. I always recommend people check those out.
I am going to check those out. Thank you very much, Dan. I really appreciate that.
Of course. Well, I mean, it's something that I would not be or advocate for if it wasn't for folks directly challenging me about this on the ACA shows. And it's a humbling thing, because you already have to figure out the whole being Christian is wrong. And then you have to figure out this shit again that you're wrong about your ideas about your relationship between humans and animals and what's actually right and wrong there. So, had to do it twice. And we'll probably do it again on many other issues, I hope, if we get to that place.
Yeah. Right on.